Disclaimer. Any of the guidance offered by the podcast host, myself, or the podcast guests is our own guidance. We are not liable for any of the actions the podcast listener decides to do. Welcome back to the Self-Esteem and Confidence Mindset podcast with me, Johnny Pardo. And today I welcome Renee Balcom to the show. So just a quick introduction to Renee. So Renee is a founder, CEO, and visionary leader on a mission to change the way people access care in America. As the founder of Scroll.care, she combines bold strategy, deep faith, and life-lived experience to build systems that put humanity first. Renee shares how confidence isn't ego, it's clarity of calling, and how self-esteem is built by working boldly in the purpose you were designed for. Welcome to the show today, Renee. Glad to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So Renee, it sounds to me like, and from what I've read and like looking into what you're doing, it sounds like you're very, very driven to help people get the right kind of care in their life. What builds that drive for you? Why kind of like have you gone in that direction? I'd love to hear a little bit more.
Well, thank you for asking. And again, thank you for having me and for presenting me to your audience. That means a lot to me. I have been a professional healthcare advocate for about 18 years. And during this time, I've really seen people suffering because they don't know how to access the right care resources, even at the medical level with their doctors. You know, we tend to go into our medical appointment and we assume the doctor is the smartest person in the room. And the truth is the doctor is not the smartest person in the room. You are. So part of my ambition in my drive, my motivation is to empower people to take charge of their own care needs and their own healthcare and ancillary care services. And by number one, understanding the business of care, because care is a business. It's up in the $50 trillion business. If you go from cradle to grave, the care industry, and that's just in America, right? So the care industry in America is very robust. And at the end of the day, most people that are in the care business are in it to make money. So if we fall victim to kind of the hearts and hands and we're here for you mentality, oftentimes we're feeling like we haven't been completely served, or we haven't received everything we need. And that can even lead to tremendous hardship, tremendous crisis, and even death. And oftentimes it's just because we didn't represent ourselves correctly in those meetings and those appointments. Or we're seeing a big uptick right now in exploitation going on in the care industry, where, kind of bad actors are presenting themselves as caregivers and they're not, entering your ecosystem and taking advantage of you. So my mission as a healthcare advocate is to learn and teach people, educate people on how to advocate for themselves. I do have a business where I do advocacy work. I have a small group of us professionals in the greater Sacramento area. But that's an expensive proposition, right? It's expensive for people to pay our hourly rate. And as I've done this work, I've been asked many times, how do I learn what you know? And so that's the mission I'm on, is to teach people and train people, educate and empower them so that they can advocate for themselves.
I love that. And for the individual who's maybe right now being like, I'm so overwhelmed, there's so much information, like, where can they start? They're like, I need care, or I know someone who needs care. They could just be a little bit overwhelmed. Where can they start?
Well, there's a few things. One is, and this is a free coursework that has been presented by Yale University. So right now, Yale is offering caregiving resources, caregiver classes and caregiver resources, just so that people can learn, again, the business of care. So go online, yale.org, I think it is, and pull up their resources for caregivers. And it's phenomenal classwork that you can do pretty simply and access that tool set. And clearly, there's also a lot of different types of care resources, throughout the internet. We're at the age of information, right? So we have training and information right at our fingertips. But I have also just spent the last 2 years developing an app called Scroll.care that We've released in the Sacramento market, but what will happen, and I can't wait to get it to Europe. What can happen today is you can speak into the app. It speaks 14 languages and understands culturally correct care. And you can ask the app tell the app what kind of care services. Maybe you need pet care, right? Maybe you're going on vacation and you need someone to look after your animal. So you can talk to the app about your animal, and it starts directing you to vetted resources right within your geography that you can connect to as the consumer, and you can hire those resources. We released Scroll in January of 2025 here in the greater Northern California area, and we'll be scaling Scroll across the United States this year and hopefully into Europe next year.
Oh, I love that. January 2025 did it about just over a year ago, kind of like to support people. Yeah, I'd love to hear about like the services on Scroll. You shared a little bit about it, like you'll be releasing pet services, but what are the kind of different services, just as an overview, that people can get access to?
Great question. We have 172 care service providers, care service subjects within the app. So everything from childcare, adult care, respite care, legal services, pet care, in-home care, nursing, medical supervision, right? We cover addictions and recovery, advanced disease recovery, right? So we cover the whole care spectrum under 172 subjects and subject matters. And we see that broadening and getting more and more different types of care providers on the app every day. Right now in Sacramento, we've had a pretty big concentration of like in-home care, assisted living, community care, and addictions care. But as we broaden across the United States, we'll see that advance all the way across the spectrum of care.
And what do you see as some of the biggest challenges across like these different cares?
I think a couple of things. One is a lot of care services are very, very unregulated. So as an example, and especially in the United States, because we have all these different state laws, right? We have federal law, but we have state law that, people usually, their businesses function under. So as an example, in California, I'll give you a great analogy that I use. In the state of California, to be a hairdresser, to cut people's hair, it takes 1,000 hours of education to do that, right? I mean, that's fair, right? But to be a fiduciary who is a professional individual that has the ability to completely take over your person legally and conserve you and take over your person, your finances legally, it only takes 60 hours, 60, right? So we have a great imbalance of regulations in the United States. In the state of Oregon, you have to be certified to be a healthcare advocate. In the state of California, you don't have to be, right? So, and it varies all over the United States. So that can be very confusing for people. Part of Scroll is if you're looking at a fiduciary and you're in Oregon, right, it will tell you what the legal requirements are for that individual, for that profession within that state. But most people don't even realize that every state may have a whole different set of rules and regulations for that profession, including medical doctors. And it's just crazy because it's all over the map, literally all over the map.
There's sounds like there's a fair few challenges there, Renee, that you're working through. So yeah, like with Scroll, how long did that take for you to like pull together? Because it sounds like you've got like all these resources, all these links, which is amazing. I absolutely love what you're doing for people. But yeah, how long did that take you to like pull together?
So I have to give you a little bit of my background.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Thank you. I was in tech. I was a CEO in tech. I was in tech 22 years. I was a CEO for 10 of those years. And back in those days, it wasn't even tech. It wasn't even tech yet. We didn't know what to call it, right? But I was in the heart of Silicon Valley and worked early on in technology. I was even at the table with the Palm Pilot and designing. You probably don't remember the Palm Pilot, but some of your audience will remember it. It was the first personal digital apparatus that was available, kind of pocket-held apparatus for people. So I've had experience in consumer technology and consumer electronics, right? I left that industry for a variety of reasons, but I left that industry and went into the care industry, which was an interesting transition because in that transition, the parallels in the care industry are so similar to the tech industry. And here's a few of them. In the tech industry, we have engineers and we have developers that really, really have a very, very high thinking process, the way they see things, their visualization. Anyone that could take X's and O's and turn that into, something that's usable. Obviously, you're thinking differently than I'm thinking, right? But they're not really great communicators. And the same thing in the medical industry, right? The doctors and the really, really high specialists aren't necessarily the best bedside manner people. They don't necessarily communicate at the same level that you and I want to be listened to and heard from, right? So when I transitioned out of tech and into healthcare, it was a fairly easy transition for me because I understood the mentality of the people that we were hoping to represent and hoping to work with. I have been a healthcare advocate for 15 years. And during that time, my mind just kept saying, where is technology in all this, right? Medicine and healthcare is very siloed. It's very layered, very complicated. Nobody knows who's going to pay the bill. The insurance premiums change every year. So it's getting more and more complex every day. So, and again, similar to technology, fast changing, it's complicated, very layered. And so I started looking backwards and looking at how do we put technology in the middle of this mess that we're calling healthcare today. And so about 8 years ago, I started analyzing different technology services, different software services, and trying to find this space where we could put an app together for healthcare and care services. And I looked at models like Angie's List, right? They were kind of one of the first people in the marketplace with this single gateway market, right? Amazon, by the way, Angie's List was in the market before Amazon was in the market, right? So Amazon's a single gateway marketplace, right? So the consumer was adopting the ability to go into a single gateway and access information, access goods and services. So that was already being well adopted by the consumer. But there wasn't anything available in the healthcare space at all at that time, especially consumer-facing healthcare. So I started writing a program about kind of outlining the program that the way I thought it could look. At the same time, I was teaching a class at Sac State, which really gave me an opportunity to glean from the market about what people thought they would need or what they would like in this kind of technology. So I spent about 6 years doing my work and doing analysis work, and then 2 years working in development. And then we just released the app last year. So, and we're starting to see some traction, and I feel good about where the app is today, but we've got a lot more amazing features coming onto the app in its third and fourth iteration. So it's a very exciting time.
I love that. Yeah, just like your combination of tech to healthcare is awesome. So yeah, I'd love to go back a little bit, like Renee, like what got you to transition from like tech to healthcare?
Well, that story fits right into your subject matter. The company that I was running, we had a division in San Jose, California. We had one in Costa Mesa, one in Puerto Rico. And of course, we were seeing technology moving to China very rapidly. I was on an airplane at least 2 weeks a month, traveling to all of those locations. And those are long, kind of thought-provoking trips. And I spent a lot of time, especially when I was in China, I really didn't feel good about watching us give our technology to a communist government. I mean, straight up, it just didn't. Sure. At the same time, my children were 6 and 7 years old, and my mother lived with us, and she was their full-time caregiver. So they were reasonably tucked in, but I was away from home a lot. And so on those long trips, I really started doing some self-analysis about what I really wanted out of my life, because I didn't feel good about where things were going with China. So I finally, on one of these trips, decided that I was going to pull away from the work I was doing in Silicon Valley, buy a small company in a small community, and raise my kids. So I hired a business broker and started down that path, and we bought a company in Southwest Oregon, right on the coast, in a just spectacularly beautiful place. I mean, it's like looking over the ocean, just diamonds, right? I was able to buy an old monastery that had been converted to a home. You know, it was a 10,000 square foot monastery. Over every room overlooked the ocean on 30 acres. It was spectacular. And so we bought that, moved to Oregon. We moved there on the Friday before 9/11. Of course, that Tuesday, 9/11 happened. By the way, I spent $5.5 million for this company, wrote a check for that, and spent basically all of the money I had as far as cash is concerned, liquidation, and bought this business, and still in the technology industry, still in the electronic component industry, but a small little company that was manageable. So we moved there before 9/11. Tuesday, 9/11 happens. I get into my office on Thursday, and when I got there, I discover that it's a shell company. And even though I did all my due diligence, I had all of my attorney and all of the legal support that I needed through this process, the whole thing was a hoax. So I wrote a $5.5 million check for nothing. And honestly, that was, you know, it was just a shocking revelation. I spent a few weeks looking at myself in the mirror and asking myself, how in the world did I get to this place? What happened? How did I get here? But at the same time, I had a family and I had this business and I have an ego. And I thought, you know what? I've built businesses before. I'm going to take what I have here and I'm going to make it work. And I still had assets in Silicon Valley. I still had resources that I could pull from. So that's exactly what I started doing. I started, you know, pulling money off of other resources that I had. I decided I was going to build this business, take this shell company and build it into something, started working on that, really started getting a little traction with that. But then the dot-com bust happened. The mortgage industry flipped upside down. And, you know, we were just in trouble. I was upside down in every way you can imagine. So I eventually filed for bankruptcy. And then I had to get a job. And I did have an opportunity to go back to Silicon Valley, and I did some consulting there. But at this point, you know, my kids, we had been there about 3 years. They were really thriving. And I realized that we have seasons in our life. And I had been able to compartmentalize my life for a long time. And I didn't want to pull away from, even though I was struggling, my kids were not struggling. My family was not struggling. And I wanted to make certain that they had everything they needed to launch into their lives. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to pull back. I'm going to get myself a job. And the first job I got was at Chase Manhattan Bank. And they fired me pretty short order. And about within 6 months, I think they fired me because, you know, I did not realize how regulated the banking industry was. Everything in a bank is regulated. And I came out of Silicon Valley where we were pretty much dealing everything we were doing, right? So I didn't understand this heavy regulated environment. And so even though they tried to work with me, it just wasn't my space. And then I was able to get a job as a marketing director for an adult care community and started doing that work. One thing led to another. I really could see the gaps in care. And so I had a man call me up and say, hey, I need your help with something. He was a neighbor and he said, you know, I've heard you speak and I need your help. And so I helped him with a medical appointment. And to be honest with you, I didn't even know what it was. I just knew he needed to be seen and heard. And I went with him to the doctor and he offered to pay me. But, you know, the doctor really liked the work that I did with this man. So the next thing you know, I start getting referrals from the doctor's office for other clients. And then within about 2 years, I had 39 employees working in 5 counties in Southwest Oregon and, you know, had built another business just in helping people, just in stepping in and helping people navigate the care industry and the social benefits industry. So that's kind of my story. You know, I think that one of the messages I try to give people is, you know, keep your head down, keep working through it, keep moving through it. It doesn't mean you're not going to lie in bed at night and think, what the heck just happened to my life, right? But, you know, there worse things happen to people and bad things happen to good people. And that's just some of the realization that I walked away with, that you still, you know, perseverance, you have to persevere through that and find your space. And to be honest with you, I believe my entire journey in my life, every single step has been ordered. And that experience in Silicon Valley, the experience in losing all of my money and my business and my stature and my self-esteem in a lot of ways, you know, led me right to where I am today. and to give me the confidence to be able to be where I am today. Without fear, I've already seen some of the worst. So I'm not afraid of what may be ahead of me. I get asked about launching this app and this new business. And, I feel like I'm just sitting in the moment of my destiny. That's truly, truly what all of this has been about, is to bring Scroll into the marketplace and to teach people and show people how to access good, reliable care. And then also to help those caregivers that are being buried in SEO fees and all of the other charges to try to manage their business, bring them up in a marketplace where people can find them, they can locate them, and they're not paying a boatload of money to be seen within a marketplace. So it's a two-sided mission, but I feel really, really good about that mission.
Amazing. I loved hearing that whole story, Renee, like from where you've been, like tech industry, and some of those challenges you went through to actually like what you were able to build, and like how you're able to support someone, and then you were seen, and then build your company. Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about like maybe when you're in those challenging times of like maybe the sort of like filing for bankruptcy side of things, because I know a lot of people go through some tough times, particularly listening to this podcast of like, like this has happened. It's relationship, health, business, finance. How did you like kind of pick yourself up? What was kind of like the self-talk in that moment?
There were a few things happening. Not only did our business tank and we had to file bankruptcy, but my husband and I divorced. And that was a very, very difficult time for my kids, right? We were, when we look back on it now, my ex-husband and I are great, great friends. And we talk about how we were just too immature to navigate what was happening together, right? We just kind of wanted to blame each other, and there wasn't anyone else to blame but each other. So our marriage did not survive that. However, we were completely devoted to parenting our children and co-parenting our children. So, for me, that was a big part of being able to move through all of this every day. Was I needed my kids to see what perseverance really looked like, what it's really like to be able to navigate difficulty in your life and keep your head up and find your way through it, right? And when you use a term, I'm going through it, the implication is you're going to get on the other side. So, the storm doesn't last forever. It's going to last for a period of time, whatever that looks like, right? But if you keep understanding that there is something on the other side of it, and you just keep moving through those times. But I will tell you, I'll share with you a story. I hired a retired state's attorney general to find the man who took my money, find the group that took my money. He was sitting offshore in a bank account in, I believe, in the Bahamas. But we did find this group and we found this man, and we did end up in court. And we were sitting in front of the judge trying to determine a jury trial and how we wanted to move forward with trial. We were 2 years in at this point. When we located him, we were able to bring him into court. And a lot of money to hire a private investigator and get everything done needed to get done, right? So I was still throwing money at yesterday's news, right? So we're sitting in the court. The judge looked at me and he said, he wanted me to understand what a trial was actually going to look like. And that he told me that he said, I believe you have a great case. I think you have a strong case, but I can never guarantee how a jury trial is going to work out, how a jury is going to make a decision, right? So he just wanted me to know that, like, I can't guarantee the results of a jury trial, number one. And number two, he wanted me to understand that they would never collect my money. That no matter what, even if I prevailed in the jury trial and the guy that took my money went to jail, they would never recover my money. My money's gone, right? So, and then the last thing that he said to me, Johnny, that really struck me was, he said, I don't see you as someone that spends a lot of time looking in the rearview mirror. And that resonated with me because I'm not that person. I don't spend a lot of time in the rearview mirror. I spend a lot of time going forward, not backwards. And I knew then that I would not move forward with the trial. And so we went into another room. I met with my attorney. We pulled the case. and we decided not to move forward. And leaving the court that day, the man that took my money held the door open for me on my way out.
Wow.
Right. And I looked at him. It was a powerful, powerful moment. But I looked at him and I knew that there wasn't anything I have to do to revenge him or to get even. There wasn't any ability to fix what had already happened, right? The only ability I had was to move forward with dignity and to be successful no matter what happened, right? And to also understand that this man was not in control. I'm a believer, and I believe God was in control. And I was there because this was a part of who I am and my cloth and who I will be as I move forward. And I truly believed that. And I clung to that so that I could show my children endurance and show them how do you get on the other side of adversity. And I did, and I have been successful with that.
I love the way that you talked about, like, he held the door open for you, and how you work through this. You mentioned about, like, God. Is, like, God, like, sort of faith something that is part of your life now?
Very much, yes. And listen, I can honestly say there have been many times in this life that I've been mad at God. But, God knew he was going to make me mad, and I don't think he cared. So I just, again, it's like a child throwing a temper tantrum, right? You have a 3-year-old that's throwing a temper tantrum, and they know mom and dad loves them no matter what, right? So I don't think God really cares when I get mad at him.
That's a really good analogy. I like that, if that's an analogy, thinking about it. But yeah, just like, if a 3-year-old doesn't really care, it's just like the parents still love him. Love them.
There's great security in knowing that, whomever your higher power is, whether it's your parents or God or whomever, that no matter what you do, it's not going to change their love for you and their devotion to you, right? So there's a lot of security in that for us. And, I think when you're going through trials and you're really having some experiences, to just bare your soul in front of God, and how angry you are, or frustrated you are, whatever that is, I think that's all good, right? I think God's, he knows, he already knows. So just speak your mind and speak your position. I actually get up about 4 or 4:30 every morning, and I spend at least an hour journaling and in prayer. And it's really a way that I set my day and kind of set my purpose for my day, and feel good about, that I'm not on this journey by myself, that God's right here with me, through every step of it. And I believe that, and I know that.
Oh, I love that. I get up at 5:30 and go to the gym, but it's like, that's a really good, and then meditate. But I love
if I'm at the gym, I'm praying like crazy because I don't like being there.
Get me through this.
Please, Lord, please. One more set.
Get me through this session. No, I love that. And then I meditate. Yeah, no, I love how you're like connecting to God and in that sense, and then really like reconnecting and or connecting, like talking to God in that way. Yeah, like I'd love to know a little bit about like the people you help in like care. They can be like, there's all these like different areas of like care. Is there anything you do about like sort of like self-love, sort of self-esteem with people in these areas?
For sure, for sure. We actually have a whole track on wellness care and positive thinking and just positive self-talk. But I have to tell you, my specialty as a healthcare advocate, as I got deeper and deeper into healthcare advocacy, I found myself really moving towards people with behavioral health issues, right? People that have schizophrenia or dual personality or manic depression. And I love that work because I know I've been able to help and affect those people to see themselves differently, to speak to themselves differently, and to move differently in their mind, even through their illness, right? We can medically assist in balancing people emotionally that maybe have a severe mental health disease. We can assist with that with some medication, but we don't want to necessarily take someone and put them in kind of a robot state, right? We want them to be in a healthy state of mind. And I think the things that help us with that is positive self-talk, movement and understanding of our body and how our body's responding to things. Put junk in our head, that's probably what's going to come out. So let's make certain we're feeding ourselves with the right information and the right visual information, right? And so I'm a big proponent of that and big supporter of working with people with mental health disease and looking at the whole person, what kind of food they're eating, how much sleep they're getting, and working in bringing remedies to them and solutions to them that satisfies the whole person. And then there's also some great apps out right now, some really, really great technology that, you know, you can dial into to get positive reinforcement or prayer or whatever positive self-talk that you need to put into your mind. You can put it on your phone. I mean, everybody has a phone, right? You can put it on your phone. A lot of it's free. And you're just sitting there listening to someone feed you positive reinforcement. That's a beautiful thing.
That's awesome. Some great points there, Renee. I'd like to ask you a little bit about your Silicon Valley days, and when you're in that tech industry, because for me, I've obviously not worked in Silicon Valley. Well, not obviously, but I've not worked in Silicon Valley. But I'd love to know, was there any kind of pattern or anything you learn from the people around you? Maybe a couple of traits that made them really good at what they were doing.
Yes. So I have to say, I was in Silicon Valley when it wasn't even Silicon Valley yet, right? We were a bunch of young 25 to 35-year-olds trying to figure out this new world of technology. And to be honest with you, we didn't know a darn thing about what we were doing. It was the time of my life. When you see those television shows about Silicon Valley, it's exactly true. It was a crazy, crazy time, right? We were living in our offices, sleeping under our desks, working like crazy, and making more money than we ever dreamed of, ever in our lives. I made more money in a year in Silicon Valley than my collective family did together, all of their money pooled together. I made more money in 1 year. So we were being paid very well, but we were living off of crappy food and sleeping under our desks. But with that said, what I loved was we knew we were on a mission. And one of the biggest takeaways that I had in Silicon Valley and in my life is you can never say no. If you think something is unattainable, it probably is. But if you tell yourself, I can do it and I can get there and we're going to figure it out, then it's available to you. It's attainable to you, right? And that's what we were doing there. No one ever had the privilege of saying, no, we can't get here. We can't we can't create a cell phone. We can't take information and digitize it. No one ever had the luxury of saying, no, we're not going to do it. We just we had to figure out how we're going to do it, right? And that was very powerful. When I worked in a group, I worked with Aero Electronics. There were, 300 of us living in this building in a bullpen, right? 325, 22 to 35-year-olds, right? Just trying to figure out, how do we actually get this done? What's next? And, it was hard, but it was so gratifying when we would have little wins, when we would see. I had the opportunity to, I don't want to name drop, but I have had the opportunity to work with Steve Jobs. And he was a tough man. He was a visionary, and he was someone that was relentless in moving everything forward. He never, ever, ever would accept no for an answer. It was never the answer. And he would even say, no just means you don't want to. So don't tell me no. Tell me you don't want to, and I can deal with I don't want to. But don't tell me no, that you can't. Because when you say you can't, you're just saying you don't want. And that became a philosophy, right? That was something that you take in at a cellular level. And I still say that if someone says to me, I can't do it, it's like, you just don't want to do it. Because of course you can do it. If you can think it, you can do it, right? And that was really one of the strongholds of Silicon Valley. I think work ethic, right? Within 10 years, I landed in Silicon Valley. I was 19 years old. I drove there in a $300 car from Missouri. That's where I'm from. And I got to Silicon Valley because I was out of money and I needed a job. I interviewed for a job, and back in those days, this was 1978. In 1978 in Silicon Valley, they would shave a monkey and give them a job if they could do it. There was so much opportunity. They just needed a breathing, mammal to sit in a room and do the work, right? But within 10 years of arriving in Silicon Valley, I was a CEO within 10 years. And that's pretty good, right?
That was awesome.
Yeah. in some ways, honestly, Johnny, it was sometimes it was last man standing, right? The crazy one that's going to like jump off the bridge, So, sometimes I was in the right place at the right time and I was literally the last man standing, right? Other times it was just that I would step into the challenge because I couldn't stand the idea of not doing it. And I'm just a natural leader, right? I've always been that person that sits at the front of the room and has questions. And, I don't usually sit in the back of the room, and I'm not too shy about wanting to understand where things are going. So I just had this natural ability to adapt to that environment and to thrive in a really fast-paced, hardcore environment. The other thing is there were not very many females in Silicon Valley at the time. So I was one of probably, I would say maybe a couple of hundred women working in the technology industry at that time. So it was that alone. Sometimes I look at that and just think that's kind of crazy, but it's just true, especially when you're working with technologists. Usually it would be male to male and not female to male. But as I was saying before, oftentimes male technologists don't know how to kind of dumb down what they're trying to explain. So I had this knack of being able to sit with an engineer, understand where he was going technically, and then dumb it down for a marketing department to be able to put together some literature and figure out how we're going to get this into the market. And that was just, a gift. Once again, like just a gift that God gave me. I didn't know anything about what I was doing when I got there. And I certainly did not arrive there with a college degree. And, to be able to progress in that industry at the rate that I did during that time, I think is an amazing story, and one that I'm really proud of, actually.
The biggest takeaway from that was like not taking no for an answer. And it's like when it's like like something important to you and like a theme or something that's matters like in the world that you want to do. And for me, it sounds like that translated to Scroll.care.
Yeah. But listen, look at some of the great technical leaders today. Elon Musk never takes no for an answer.
Oh, he doesn't.
Ever.
I don't know. I've never met him, but I can see it.
It's clear he doesn't, right? Nothing ever comes to his mind that he thinks is impossible.
We're getting to Mars. It's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. He just has to figure out a way, but nothing ever makes him go, oh no, I don't think we can do that. Right. That's great leadership and great thinking. And if people in your audience that, have a goal or something comes to their mind and then they think, oh, I can't do that. The fact is you can. If you thought it, you can do it. All you have to do is figure out every single solitary step. The best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time, and take whatever that vision is, whatever that God-given vision is, and start working it down to the molecular level, the smallest level, and you can get there. I promise you can.
So for you, has it always been, let's go to like Scroll.care, it's always been like a vision in your mind, but just like, right, I've got this vision in my mind, it's happening, I'm just going to take it one step at a time.
Yes. I have self-funded Scroll so far, and that's good and bad. It's good in that, I've had to kind of take it slow. As the money would come, I would be able to, and I would do that through my consulting company. So as the money would come, we would invest more in Scroll. But it also, a couple of things happened. So when I first started looking at outlining and framing Scroll, I knew I wanted a heavy AI front end on the app. But back even just 5 years ago, to have AI programmed and developed was going to cost $500,000. I just didn't have that money. So we did the best we could with a pretty simple front end. We were developing the back end, but we had and the front end is like the user interface, right? So you don't want it to be too complicated anyway, because you want the user to feel comfortable when they're coming in. So we did a pretty simple front end. But by the time I got to my beta, by the time the app was ready to take to the market in beta, the cost of AI had come down so much that you could buy it as a plug and play, right? And I could just plug it into the app and get an AI front end. So, and again, from my technology experience, I knew as technology increases, the cost decreases. And that's called Moore's Law. And I knew that Moore's Law would take effect at some point in AI. I just didn't know how quickly that was going to occur. And it occurred much faster than I would have dreamed that it did, but that it would. But today we have a pretty robust AI front end at very, very small amount of investment on that. And all of the back end, once you get on the other side of the app, when we're doing data capturing and we're helping you with education and some other things, that's a much more complicated programmed back end. So I know I'm getting a little technical, but does that make sense? Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Love to hear kind of your thoughts on like technology. Renee, I'd love to just like, as we're kind of wrapping things up, love to hear a little bit about Scroll.care again and your vision for it, because it's an amazing thing you're doing. Like, you've come out of tech, you really want to help people in like care in multiple areas. We'd love to just hear your like vision over the next few years for it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that question. In working with families that, are caregivers, or they are the responsible party to coordinate care for everything from their children to their elderly parents, or even after death, right? Like, trying to take care of their parents' affairs or their grandparents. I mean, it's heart-wrenching sometimes to watch people struggle through some of the most hard, daunting services that they will ever need in their life, and some of the most costly, right? So it was important to me that we would find a different way, that we would use technology to be able to introduce the care seeker and the consumer to vetted resources. And all of our resources, we do national and international background checks on every provider on the app. It meant so much to me to be able to put a consumer on the app and feel good and comfortable that whomever they're introduced to, whoever the app introduces them to, they can feel comfortable in getting professional services and not having someone rip them off or exploit them or take advantage of them, right? Today, Scroll, you can actually speak into the app and you can say, I'm going to have a hip replacement. My doctor wants me to have a hip replacement, and I need to understand what that really looks like and what kind of care I need, right? So the app starts asking you questions and writing a care plan for you. And your care plan may say, okay, you need to do a little pre-op, some exercises and some, hip flexors and some other things, right? And so the app will talk to you about wellness care, get your diet in order, and how to get ready for this operation, right? Then the next step is it'll tell you what to expect when you get the surgery. And then it'll tell you about post-op care, like what kind of physical therapy you need, and that you can actually get that in your home, and who's going to pay that bill, and how to get your insurance to cover that, right? So the app literally builds out a care plan for you on whatever that service or that need is. We've tried to cover the entire plethora of services, as I mentioned, from cradle to grave. So, childcare. There's nothing worse than having, your 13-year-old teenage daughter go off the rails, right? So, you want to find a good, reliable, respectable therapist for your kid, right? So we have all of those services, and the app really helps you find those good vetted providers within your market. The other thing that I'm really proud of is, instead of us taking your information and selling it, blasting it out to the world, the control of those relationships and that information remains in the hands of the consumer. So we never sell your information. You can go onto the app, feel completely in charge of who you're going to talk to, who you're going to give your information to, and how they're going to receive you. So, and I'm really proud of that, because all too often someone's selling your information, then you're being bombarded by all of these people that are soliciting you, probably at a time when, you're feeling pretty vulnerable. So I've never had appreciation for that. So that was one of the cornerstones of the app, was that the consumer was in charge of their own information and who would receive that.
Oh, it's beautiful, Ray. Yeah, people like feeling in control of what they're looking for, and how you're catering for people from like cradle to, to their old age as well. So I think
and I think too, being culturally correct, right? So I'm going to assume my mother maybe had a different expectation of what care looks like than your mother, right? So if when you're looking at care services, especially for the elderly, and maybe English isn't their first language, right? You want to make certain you're bringing people in that understand your culture, your values within your home, your religion, right? And so Scroll, we have 14 languages now on the app, and Scroll, we're working to bring culturally correct care to the marketplace.
I like that. Not a one size fits all. We're all like, for what you need specifically as an individual, it sounds like you're at, rather than like this one size fits all. That's the right care for you. You're this age, you're that age, therefore this is like the way you need to go. It sounds like it's very like, what's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, it's very personalized.
Yeah, personalized. That's a great word. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, very personalized. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And that's the whole point, right? I mean, honestly, you could go on a Google search engine and probably find a caregiver, but if you really want personalized care, Scroll can help you get that right down to whatever measurement you want it at.
I like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a bit more than like, yeah. When I
And then
want something specific, like I like to find like an expert or like a database or something like for care. That's a beautiful, like what you're offering is beautiful. It's like really helping people for their needs, personalized.
yeah, one of the clients that I work with is a little boy, 5 years old, and he's been misdiagnosed in medicine quite a lot. And we've been able to come alongside of this family and bring the right resources to them so we could get a really good diagnosis on this little boy. I don't like seeing labels on children because I think we hamper them with labels. So I really just wanted to make certain that he had that we brought in the right services for him. And one of the things that we discovered was that he was having some environmental allergies. So some of his behavior issues was really based on how he was responding to, like mom burning candles in the house and some of those things that was triggering these allergies, right? The family had no idea, right? So, but with Scroll, we were able to put in his information, put in his medical data, and come back with some next step ideas to look at so that we could get a really good evaluation of him again as a whole person. And you can go to the doctor all day long, but they're not going to ask you what kind of candles you're burning in your house, right? Or your mother's burning in her house. So those sorts of things where Scroll can really, really help the onion and give you a very specific, real person point of view about what you're dealing with.
Very personalized, very specific. I love it. Yeah, I'm a big fan of like you need to help the individual, specific to the individual. So I love how Scroll's doing that for people and what they need specifically. So that's
Yeah.
really beautiful, Renee. Thank you for doing that for us.
And there's the other side too, is that there's great providers and practitioners that people have never heard of that are right in
Mm,
your right that they've never
mm.
heard. We're elevating through the app so that you get to know that Julie down the street is a great physical therapist and she's 2 miles away, right? So it allows you to marry up with great providers right within your zip code, which is
Reminds me, sorry, I get off the subject, but like with like marketing, Grant Cardone, if you've heard of him, like the big market. Yeah, he goes like the best known often gets like, sometimes beats the best. But it's like, yeah, sometimes the best known is not always the best. Like
right.
McDonald's does not do the best burgers. It's like what I'm hearing here is like, yeah, that's the well-known provider there, but maybe they're not right for you. But actually what your app's doing is like, oh, there's this provider here, but maybe you've not heard of them, but they're going to really suit your needs.
Right, right, right.
I love
And again, very personalized.
it. Mm.
And you, the consumer, get to make that decision. And listen, for you and your audience, we right now, Scroll is very focused in the Sacramento area, but anyone can come on Scroll.care right now as a consumer and just, trolley through the app and send me information and tell me what you think and communicate with me because we're still really, really in development. So we're excited to hear what people think and get their feedback. So feel free to go in and tell me the good side and the bad side. So because we're here to make it right.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, absolutely. I know listeners both in the US and the UK and worldwide love to have a look. So Renee, as we kind of like wrap up today, I'd love to just kind of wrap up with what are the best places to find you and get on the Scroll app, just to kind of like recap it. And is there maybe a final point that you'd like to leave us with today?
Yes, thank you. I am simple. Our emails are so simple. Renee, RENEE @ Scroll.care. And so you can reach me there anytime. Scroll.care is our URL, so you can access the app through that. We are a web-based app, so go on your computer. You can access it through your search engine on your phone as well, but go on your computer and kind of mosey through it and look at it. And then, the kind of going back to what we were talking about, kind of taking a stroll down memory lane. I really love your mission and your audience, and I just want anyone out there that has a dream or feels like they want to move in a certain direction, but they're hedging, they're hesitating, they're not sure. I just want to encourage them to do it. Just do it, right? I think everyone is born with purpose and potential and a mission. And we're at a time right now where we're just bombarded with all of this information and these things that kind of hold us back. And I just want to encourage people to step into that dream, because it didn't come without a reality attached to it. And as I said, my experience in Silicon Valley, when you're taking air and you're turning it into a cell phone, that's crazy thinking, right? That's crazy thinking. Who in the world thinks that way, right? But when you're taking air and you're saying we're going to land on Mars, and we're going to land on Mars, right? Or we're going to have an electric car or flying cars or whatever it is, right? We're going to be able to do, a heart transplant, or, whatever those dreams are, the simplest ones, even step into it, because it just takes you further in your life. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid.
I love that. Some really beautiful things to end with there, Renee. No, thank you. And yeah, for Renee's services, like everything she's offering, Scroll.care, please get in contact with Renee. Please look at the app. You can find it in the show notes below. I have linked it right below this episode. Once again, Renee, massive thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. God bless you.
Of course, thank you. So that concludes our episode for today. And remember, to lead with your heart and not with fear.